What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Benos podcast. And today's guest is none other than Andrew Bogut. And I'm not wearing this jumper for no reason. It's the Boomers jumper that I received from one of the assistant coaches during one of our battles. We talked a lot about those battles that we had, whether it was World Cup or the Rio Olympics that are most memorable to me personally, as well as his career as a player, the mentorship he received from coaches and other people around, the values he got implemented by his parents, the examples that his parents set for him in terms of work ethic, and a lot of things that people don't see that matter, that are between the lines and behind the scenes. So please enjoy this episode. Also listen all the way to the end because he told also some really great Rick Majerus stories. For those who don't know, you'll get to know a little bit of Rick Majerus' side and history. Please subscribe to this channel. Not only to this YouTube channel, but also to on all the podcast platforms that exist. Enjoy this episode. Enjoy all the other episodes up until now that I had. And some great guests, some great insights from Andrew Bogues. I appreciate it. And everyone else, please enjoy. Andrew Bogut. Bogues, thanks for joining me.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're not acquaintances, but we do have a common acquaintance, and we cannot start this podcast without giving him a shout out. So James Duncan, our Canadian friend, thanks for doing the introduction.
JD, yeah.
Yeah, current head coach of Brisbane. So
Yep.
be a big season coming up for him. Thanks for doing this. Before we start into it, we also have another common connection, which I want to start off with. And I didn't want to start off with the curveball, but let's see how good your memory works if you go back a bit. So it's under 20s, and it was nationals in Brisbane, and you were already at the AIS, and you played with the guard. His name was Lee Jekka. Do you remember him?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Yep.
So we had a little chat about you. He's Lithos and Aussies have a long history, and my first introduction to the Australian culture was Lee. Because when I came back from college, I came to play for my father back in Germany, and he was already playing for him, and we're the same age. So we're like brothers until now. He's like my brother from another mother. So
Yeah. I remember him. Yeah, he was. I was bottom age, so I was kind of a little bit different. At the under 20s, I still wasn't as good as I was that next year. But yeah, I definitely remember Lee for sure.
yeah, he said that ask him off air if he remembers me. I said no, I'm doing it on air.
No, I remember him. Yeah, I remember all my teammates for the most part, especially state team. And we called him. We said that he had the appropriate name because he shot it a lot. So Jacka, it worked out well.
Yeah, he did. That's a good one because he was jacking it up a lot. When we were playing, and
Yeah, the perfect name.
no, I listened to a lot of your My Journey episodes, and for everybody listening, Rogue Bogues is your podcast. I really encourage everybody to get to and get to know you a little bit better, your history, because while I was listening to it, a lot of it honestly reminded me of there was a lot of memories that came up through Lee, because Lee, shout out also to Hoppers Crossing where he's from, because I lived there for a month with him. So
Yeah.
he there was some similarities in terms of coming up, but you really there was some tough upbringings from what I understood from your early years, and there was a lot of sliding door moments in your life, it felt like. So where do you feel like was one of the sliding door moments where, like, besides, I mean, building bombs, getting into some fights, there was a lot of fun stories, or like scary stories, honestly, but where do you feel like your life could have turned for the worse?
Oh man, it was all throughout my childhood. There were different problems with every kind of year I went up. So primary school had its own problems with fights and trying to fit in, and I think the transition to high school was probably really hard for me. I was, a big dude but really skinny, and stood out, in seventh grade or year 7. Everyone above me thought I was older, so I was copying shit from people. So even the the bus route that I took, which I spoke about on my journey, was through a rough area, where there was people high on drugs and thieves getting on and people that wanted to just take mess with you, and you kind of had to figure out just the daily happenings and be street smart. And if you didn't, you get in trouble, right? So I felt like every year I went up through high school was a different challenge, and from the basketball side of things, I guess that was a similar story, really. I bounced around a lot, changed clubs 3 or 4 times, and was told I'd never be anything. I've got a bad attitude, and blah blah blah. But I kind of knew that I love the game more than anybody else, and I was always in the gym or in my backyard shooting. So I knew that eventually it just has to kind of work out. I didn't expect to be an NBA player. I would have been just happy to play in the NBL in Australia, but yeah, it all just kind of came together quickly.
Was that like kind of with those situations that you talked about, and like those fights, or like people were trying you, or even I would say even bullying you because you were taller than everybody else? There was some of that going on as well. Also, with your Croatian background, you said there was also some of a different perspective towards you. But did that toughen you up in terms of your career and help you throughout to like overlook over some challenges that you had to face later on?
Yeah, I think so. I think it did. At the time, it didn't seem that easy, but it just made you kind of, it just felt like it was me against the world, really. And that's a cliche that a lot of American players use and players use in general, but it really felt that way. Like there was no one in my corner besides my family, really. So yeah, it was hard, but it was kind of, you couldn't, in the moment, it was hard and you dwelled on it a little bit, but you had to then move on. And it just taught you that, going through all those obstacles to still make it to where I did just came down to the time that I put in, and there was nothing really else other than that. A lot of people say, well, you're 7 foot. Well, I know a lot of people, as probably you do as well, that are 7 foot or 6'10" or 6'11". I know a guy at 7'4" that didn't have a professional career, didn't make it in basketball because they didn't put the time in, right? That's what talent gets you so far in juniors. Your body can get you so far, but if you don't put time in, and let's be honest, everyone in the NBA has generally 90% plus have put the time in. There's a few freaks that probably don't have to put in as much time because they're athletically gifted, like top 1% athleticism, and they can half play. You're going to be okay in the NBA, but that's really rare. The majority are guys that put in a lot of work, and that was kind of my story, was just putting in the time and effort.
Yeah, we'll get to the hard work part because there was a lot of things that I wanted to dig into as well, because there's a lot of thoughts that came to my mind between the generational changes, and you witnessed throughout your time about the generational change from like, let's say, the non-social media era to social media era, and like the practices you had to go to in terms of 2-a-days and tough practices and physicality, compared to what it's now, where it's a little bit easier. Matter of fact, let's talk about it now. So there was, you talked about the 2-a-days, and I was during the same time coming up in the States as well, and it was like, I mean, it was a rough introduction for me to the next level of basketball. But you like had to work hard, and you had this perspective of like not having done enough always. You felt like you had this feeling inside that you needed to work harder and harder and harder. And nowadays it's more focused on longevity, and it feels like people are working out more individually in terms of like focusing on 80% of commitment and hard work, but therefore playing longer. And during your career, it felt like you were just 100% into it, and maybe just because of that had like maybe 1 or 2 years shaved off your career. Would you say that was the case, or when you look back on, how do you compare those two generations?
Oh, it's way different now, and it's it's almost like with the way they manage sport performance, is they don't want you to do too much extra work, at least at the pro level. I mean, what kills me is that the sports science of once you're a professional makes sense, because you don't want guys to, let's say after a team session they're going to do another session and you don't know about it, and they're getting overly fatigued for games. That makes sense for a professional team, but That's now gone down into junior, at least in Australia. In the US, it has, where it's that load management has now reared its ugly head in high school and even college, right? And I think that's the prime time where you can overload yourself. You're not going to burn yourself out at 16, 17, 18. We'd have 2 days and still be out sometimes, that night chasing girls, and you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
whereas
100%.
when you're in your mid to late 20s, you have 2 days, you're wrecked, you're done, right? So that's the difference. And I think you have to put a lot of time in at a young age, and that gap usually you got to love the game all throughout your childhood. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, but the real serious time it's probably that 12 to 15, 16. That's the most crucial part for any professional athlete in most sports, to be honest with you. And if you really put the time and effort in those 3 or 4 years, you can make it to the next level. But that's changing these days. There's a lot of kids that don't put as much time in because they're told not to. You need your rest. Because they're emulating what the professionals do, right? So when LeBron's doing load management, the best kid on his high school team thinks, shit, I need to do the load management too to get better. Whereas I think at that age, you can push yourself a little more. But it's changed. Even the 2 days in the NBA when I first came in, coming from the national team, it was we had one point with the national team had 3 days. We had two practice sessions on the court, physicality, and then we had a conditioning / weight session. So it was 3 sessions a day. It was bananas. Like, you were just wrecked after those camps, right? When I first came into the NBA, the union changed the rule where you couldn't have 2 contact sessions a day. It had to be, I think you guys in Europe do the similar thing, right? One of them is like a shooting session, non-contact. They're still pretty hard, and then a contact session. Well, the NBA never used to have that. And then, so my first year, the coaches were pretty pissed about it. They thought it was bullshit. So what they did, I still remember it, was Terry Stotts. He made a joke about it. You guys in the union, we can't do 2 days. We can't do 2 physical sessions a day. Cool, we're going to do our physical in the morning. And for our afternoon session, bring your running shoes. And that's, so it was like a bunch of shooting drills with penalties of like actual, 10 up and backs in a minute, suicides, all that stuff. And it was probably harder as far as running than the contact session. So I was part of that. So there's definitely a transition. These days, the 2 days, the later I got in my career, you obviously get those veteran points. Steve Kerr and those coaches, like most of us older guys, would only do 1 session a day because you just don't want a guy to get hurt at that point in the season. You don't want him to be burnt out by January, February in the NBA. So it's all about making sure that you're going to be ready in March, April, May for a deep playoff run and finals run. And we learnt that being with the Warriors. When I was with the Milwaukee Bucks, not so much, because the goal for us was just to make the playoffs. So you went all in for that. Whereas with Steve Kerr and the Warriors, they knew we'd be there somewhere at the end. So it was almost a chess game to make sure, to be honest, most teams that win, the probably top 4 or 5 teams that really have a chance to win a championship, usually the most healthy out of them wins it, usually. Or they're right there. If you have a major injury, you're in some trouble. And we saw that even last season with Kevin Durant, and he was limited a little bit coming back early, and then, Milwaukee got him at the end of the day. They were probably the more healthy team. So that's just how it goes.
Especially the top guys, right? And I feel like there's a thin line, and because my father was playing, he was coming up through the Soviet Union regime, let's say, when they were practicing also 3 days. He said, like, early morning running session, then you go in the gym hard, and then you go in the gym in the evening hard again. So the times change, but I feel like there is a thin line, and like you said, like in the youth sector, I think it's mandatory to push them to their limits, because otherwise they will not know how to push themselves in a game through tough situations, through tough times, tough moments, when you're tired, when you're fatigued. There's like you get off the cliff and you hold them back at a young age. They will not understand what it takes to do it during the games, I feel like.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you just have to understand that it does take time on the court. Learning the game, having a basketball IQ, that some of it's natural, but a lot of it's just time spent. It's, the figure that I always quote when I do speaking gigs, like I do some speaking seminars sometimes, and for any industry or any sport, they say 10,000 hours. It takes 10,000 hours to master a craft, right? So if you do the math and you never master a sport, but you can be at the upper echelon. 10,000 hours is a lot of hours to put in, and that's training at a decent clip, not like shooting with your boys at the park, right? So
Yeah.
if you do the math, that's even if you're doing 2 or 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, 20, 30 hours, you times
Yeah,
that
man,
by
that's,
1,000 days, it's only, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's only 2,300. So yeah, you've got a lot of time to put in, and that goes for everything. It goes for if you want to be a plumber or a carpenter or a rock star or play the guitar, it's 10,000 hours. So you have to put the time in at a young age, and once you're older, you have the luxuries of being able to tone it back, because once you're in your professional career, you've kind of the base that you've built from 11, 12 to 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. That's basically the base you're going to have for your career. It's very hard to completely remodel your game beyond that, and not many players can do that.
Yeah, it's about the quality of the 10,000 hours, right? And people say there's the 10,000 hours have been debunked because there's different opinions to that, but I feel like it's the quality of the hours that you put in, and not like you said, like playing ball at the park and just like, oh, I did put up some shots, but you didn't do it within a structure, within a system, within a certain regime where you feel like you're accomplishing and you're working towards something. I think that's where the quality of the hours come in.
And video too, like
Yes.
even weights count towards those hours. So recovery can as well. Like anything that's the biggest thing that I did that actually helped me was I watched a shitload of basketball as a kid, and it wasn't by design. I just loved the game, so I watched it. Like NBL, NBA game of the week, NBA action. I'll record in Australia back then. We only had one game a week, which was from the NBA, and it was condensed to 1 hour. So it was the game of the week, and then they'd have the show NBA action, which I love because it was just highlights of the whole show, and then the top 10 plays of the week. So what I would do is I'd record both of those shows, which would be on I think it was a Sunday morning in Australia. I'd watch it Monday, Tuesday. I watch the same thing every day: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then I record the next episode, and then watch that. And then when it was the off season, I'd go back to the start of all those highlights and watch them all, and go through each episode again. And I always had basketball to watch. Whenever it was raining, I couldn't go outside, I'd watch. And just by design, my basketball IQ grew by accident because I just watched so much. Even the fancy pass that the guy made because the third side help defender came and it was a touch pass. Why did he do that? Oh wow, So then I ended up learning some of that stuff just by watching. So it doesn't just mean on court. It could mean getting your body better, stronger, doing some skipping, whatever it is. But yeah, there's a lot of time you can put into your craft. And I mean, everything's debunked these days, but I still think if most kids that have a decent base of skill and qualities and they're a decent player at 11, 12, and they put in a shitload of time, I feel like they're going to have a better chance to be a better player than that kid. That every kid at 11, 12 that was the most talented kid in our state, none of them made it professional. There was one, Reese Carter, who was on that team with Lee Jacker, actually. He made it. He was the number one prospect, and he ended up being one of the worst guys out of that group professionally. But he was the number one prospect from like 13, 14, 15. And I still remember all the names when I was 11 and 12. You hear about names at other teams. Oh, this guy's a shit. Like this. Oh man, he's really good. None of them made it professionally, right? And that's generally how it works in most sports.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things that play into that. The first foundation is love. You have to love the game. Like for me, I was growing up in Germany, and there was like one live game a week as well. And I was watching it from Sunday to Monday, Sunday into Monday, 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 to 6. And then, recording it, sometimes not recording, but you watch it, I'm watching it, and I have to go to school like within the next hour or so, wrecked completely. And that's when you feel like that's what you have to absolutely be committed naturally. You cannot force yourself to love it. And then I was getting myself hyped before practice watching the Jordan documentaries. Back then there was like this trilogy that came out, and you just keep watching, you keep loving it more and more. You start emulating it, and to a certain degree implementing it into your games, because it's just naturally you're absorbing the game. So I think that's one foundation. You absolutely have to naturally love it and be committed to it.
Yeah, no doubt, 100%. And that goes with most industries, I think.
Yeah. Just to go back to your background, because I prepared different areas of your life. To go back to your background and personal life, it seemed like from what I was listening to your episodes, that you have really strong principles and beliefs, and the value system was very strong. Could you talk a little bit about how it was implemented early on? I think it was I assume it was through your parents or through your father to coming up and having strict structure in your daily life.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are from the Balkans, so go figure. They're strict. My father's father was really strict, and then the lineage was even stricter as you went up and up to great grandparents, right? And they, my family didn't have a lot growing up in Croatia, and I guess it just you had to work. It was, my father ran his own business as a mechanic, essentially carburetor fuel specialist. But he was, the weekends he was always fixing something around the house. So he never stopped. Saturdays, Sundays, he'd be fixing something, mowing the lawn, washing the cars, just doing something, right? And it wasn't great as a kid at times because, if I was training all week and I'd come, it'd be a Saturday and I'd have 3 or 4 hours off before the next game or don't have anything on the Saturday and I'd be lying on the couch. If he came inside, he's doing something outside, building something, mowing the lawn, he comes inside for a coffee and sees you laying there doing nothing, it was the worst possible thing in the world. So I figured to try to avoid him or just get out of the house at all costs because he'd look at you and be like, nothing to do, huh? Bored are you? Okay, come with me and, give you a shovel or give you some, and that was kind of the upbringing. It was like, there's always something to do. There's always something you can help with on the house. And if you're not training for basketball, you should be doing X, Y, Z. So that's kind of how I grew up to be always kind of doing something, and it just wasn't an excuse to do nothing. My family weren't going to be people that lived off the government and done nothing and kind of were just lazy sitting at home, or we had every excuse under the sun to be victims of racism and victims of the society being migrants, and that we see a lot of that today. That's kind of noted a lot in the media about people being victimized, and that's human beings. You gotta, as much as that sucks at times, I'm not condoning it. You gotta get on with it. You have to get on with it and push through it. And if you let those people get you down about their comments or how you feel in society, then it's going to be even 100 times worse. But if you keep punching back and grinding and fighting and doing those things, and that's kind of what we're taught to do. But it's easier said than done. It was hard. My father probably took the brunt. My father and mother both took the brunt of what our family has today, is because he moved at 14, 15, not knowing a word of English. So at a time when Australia, we see stuff in the media today about racism and all of this in Australia in 2021, and it's 1% of what it was in the 70s and 80s to what my father experienced not knowing English. It was really bad back then, and that's what he says to this day. Like, there's no racism really today in Australia. Like, what I copped in the 70s and 80s was torturous for a 15, 16-year-old, and his way was to fight his way out of it, was to basically punch everyone in the face that was talking shit to him, and that's kind of how he got through his day. That's all he knew. But yeah, I mean, my father's way of living was work, and that's pretty much instilled in most of the family.
Yeah, if like today's episodes, everything that happens is so magnified through the media, through social media. It just goes around, goes viral, and then it just gets like, we're living in the best possible lifetime, best possible world compared to what it was like 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, and we're not realizing it as we go through it. But it seems like, I mean, like your father, your parents were the prime example of how you went about your business later on with putting in the work. And you said like respecting work. And that's one thing I learned from Messina as well. Like when I was working, I spent 2 years with Messina in the locker room basically. And it's just like, he implements that to whatever you do. Whenever you apply your craft, you have to respect your work. You build the lead, you have to respect that you build the lead, the work that you put in, and not to give it up again. So those are little things that also, I think, through your value system are visible. The way your childhood went, the way you was brought up. And there's one thing that stood out also when you were talking about respecting money, because you didn't have to, even you moved off campus your second year, and you found yourself like running out of money quickly, and you had to get a job, and you did get a job as being the best college athlete at that time and basketball player at that time. How did you feel doing that? Did you feel that's what I have to do? I just have to do it. That's how it is, and I move through it, or were you like how were you dealing with that? Basically, I'm trying to understand, imagine.
Oh man, it was hard. It was hard. I still remember. I went and asked our coach for money first and foremost. I said, I need, it's illegal, but I've got no money to eat. Like I can't. I got no. I screwed up. I shouldn't have moved off campus, but I've done that now. And by the time I paid my rent and my fuel and utilities, I had $100 left for the whole month to eat and get around, which is pretty. Lasted about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And what I would do is I'd take a lot of food home when we had practice, take the leftovers and eat that for a day or two. But it got to a point where I needed more money, and my grandmother got an inheritance from a divorce from my grandfather from 20, 30 years prior. Finally got the settlement, not inheritance, settlement, and she gave me a little bit of money, which helped, but it didn't get me over the line. So yeah, I went to the coach. I said, I need some cash, and they said, we can't give you cash. We can try to help you find a job. So I got a job from a sponsor of ours, or a booster. He owned a bar called Skybox. So every Friday and Saturday night, it was 5 till 10 on Friday and Saturday. In Utah, I was only 18 or 19. I was 19, going on 20 at the time, and I wasn't legal enough to drink. So in Utah, there was a law where you couldn't serve alcohol if you weren't of age. So I couldn't be a waiter. All I could do was run food. So my job was just when the food comes on the line to help the waitresses out and take the food out to people. And it was a hard job. It was really hard because you're on your feet all day for 5 straight hours. You don't sit down. You can barely go to the bathroom. You have to go quickly. And on top of that, I was still working the job during training camp. So I was having tour days, and then had to run off and go to work on Friday and Saturdays. And yeah, I remember I hated it, but I had to do it, and it gave me enough of a buffer zone to at least get me through. So, working those 10 hours, I was getting 10, 15, $20 an hour. I can't remember what it was. I think I was getting paid good money. It was like $20 an hour they gave me. So it gave me a couple $100 each weekend that I could just bank up and save, and then it got me through, till the end of the season.
Barely. I mean, it sounds like, you trying to imagine like the best college player in the country barely getting through the season. I mean, it was hypocritical, and to say the least. It's gotten better now, but it was hypocritical at the time.
Yeah, and I wasn't happy about it. The thing I wasn't happy about was that, I walk into the bookstore and my jersey's for sale. There's a Bogut jersey in there. They're making money. It didn't have my name on it. It just had number 4, but obviously it was my jersey. I can't get a cut of that. And I wasn't one of those athletes that, I've said from even since I was in college, I didn't need hundreds of thousands of dollars. All I wanted was to be able to take a girl out to the movies, go to dinner, live a normal life like once a week, be able to eat food and fill up my car. So for me, that was just like, give me a couple of grand a semester, like 3-4 grand in college for a semester is like, man, you're living like a king, right, in college. Yeah. So it wasn't like I wanted all these perks and stuff. And that's what frustrated me about the college system, was that they're using my name to sell tickets, and I was the clear number one, prospect in America. I swept all the awards, and but I wouldn't change it. I think it was an important lesson that I had to go through the grind and grueling parts of even the success at times to realize that once you get there, you value it even more. And I think it is a piece of who I am, essentially, right?
Yeah, you you feel like you earned it. You feel like you got something accomplished and you earned it, and you feel good about yourself too, that you really earned the money, and that makes it plants the seed for your future life as well as you're going up. Like I was brought up similarly in terms of counting, making sure that you're not spending money very vigorously, and whenever you put in the work in, that you also value the money that you get in for that. In college, I also like summer jobs that I had to work in order to afford the insurance for the car, in order to afford the car itself. One time I remember I had to go back after I did my knee in college, and the summer job that I took back in Germany one summer. And I was at the pizza place, and I was standing up all day as well. Like you were, it reminded me of that. And I remember I was going through that, and at one point, and I regret it till this day, because it's still implemented in me that I quit. I quit on the job, although it was for my health, because my knee was starting to ache. But I quit the wrong way. I walked away without calling one day. Just 2 weeks or 3 weeks into it, I was like, man, forget this. This is bullcrap. And I just didn't come in. But the worst thing is that my friend helped me get that job. So I didn't throw myself under the bus or the pizza company.
Yeah.
him, you know. So I feel like that it hurts until this day. And yeah, but this it was a lesson that I reflect on, that I will never do it again because it hurts. So
It's an important lesson, yeah, for sure.
yeah, finding identity as a player. I wanted to talk because you uh, ev- evolved from a guard to a big throughout your time. You were started as a guard, and Sabonis Senior, by the way, was also similar. Like he started playing as a guard, and then all of a sudden he grew and he had all the guard skills as a big. But I wanted to make to figure out, when did you feel like you had this identity change and you felt like you really understood who you are as a player, because it's a big skill set you gain throughout your career, throughout your youth, as a guard, and then coming up, growing, and then growing to your body and finding yourself. Like, when did you feel like you understand who you are as a player?
Oh man, I had numerous changes. So I started as a big at 10, 11 because I was the biggest kid in the group. So I was like, you're the center, go stand on the basket. That was kind of the mentality. And then I didn't grow for a while for some reason. Like I just didn't grow for like a year or two. I barely grew anything. And then everyone shot by me. I was a real late developer. And then I was like, shit, I'm like a 2-3 right now. I need to start, I was bringing the ball up. I used to shoot the three ball really well as a kid. And then as I got to 15, 16, it was clear I was going to be, close to 7 foot. So then I had all these guard skills. And the guy that I work with, I had a guy that I work with here in Australia from Serbian, Croatian, half Croatian guy. And his whole thing was like, we're not pigeonholing you to a position. I want you to be able to play all kind of positions. Don't get pigeonholed. You'll probably end up being a 4 or a 5, but that'll come, learn all the different skill sets. And then, so in college and even early on in my NBA career, I was a much more mobile, big that could do a lot of things, go coast to coast with the ball. I was still shooting jumpers at that point. In college, I shot, I think low 30s from 3, like not at a big scale, but if you left me wide open, I'd shoot them. Kind of Sabonis seniorish, like, wide open, feet set, I'd knock it down. And then through the injuries, it kind of changed the scope where I became more of that traditional utilities big. So I've gone through many different phases of position basketball. I mean, I played before my whole rookie year in the NBA next to Jamal McGlaw, So,
Yeah.
And that's also a testament to what the game's changed now, right? It's more skinny, mobile bigs, the big banging Shaqs. They're just not found much anymore. It'd be interesting to see if a Shaq type guy came into the league today, how that would work, because they'd pick and roll the shit out of him. But on the other end, it's like you got an Anthony Davis guarding a Shaq. So that'd be something I really want to see in the future. But yeah, man, I mean, I've had different phases, and I appreciated all of them, and would have liked to have still been that mobile guy later on in my career to be able to shoot the three with the way the game was going. But it went past me, and once I lost that kind of skill and became more of a defensive, rugged, rebounding guy, that was it.
Yeah, but that's like 9 for 25 your sophomore year from 3. So that's one thing I also jotted down, because you were you were beating the shoot for your license drills, and you were able to shoot it in the games because you were making the 35 out of 50. I think it was that you said the coach was making you shoot.
Yeah, that was a tough drill too, by the way, a real tough drill. Yeah, I think it was above 35 you had to make. Yep.
Yeah, and you're like, there was shooters that didn't make that drill. So like, allow me to be direct, but it was from a shooting big to like you said, to a non-shooting, to like a rugged defensive play big who passes and makes the offense go around. I was wondering, was that a mental regression, or was it based on the system that you played on that had you do certain things that made you play a certain way, and then in order for that you regressed in the shooting area?
Oh, it was a mix of things, to be honest with you. I didn't really shoot him a lot in the NBA, just the way we played. It was more that it was 3 out, 2 in my rookie year and first couple of seasons. Myself and Jamal was the way the game was played. I still shot 18-footers at a decent clip. And just never really felt comfortable shooting the long 3 in the NBA. Got a few up, but then, I'd go to the 2008 Olympics. I think I was top 3 in 3-point field goal percentage, I believe. You might have to look it up, but I was up there, top 5 possibly. I really shot the ball well. I think it was 5 for whatever it was, or 6 for whatever it was. And then just go back to the NBA and played more of a role inside. Then the injuries came, and then once I snapped my elbow, that's when my game really changed. Like I snapped my elbow, broke my elbow fully hyperextended it, chipped the bone, broke my wrist and broke my finger all in the same injury. And it took me a long time to even be able to shoot the ball with my right hand again. And so then I rushed back from that injury probably too soon. I did it in, I think it was March. I made All NBA 13 that year. I probably should have been an All-Star. Really felt like everything was coming together in my career. And then I was back on the court stupidly in September already from that injury. So it was 4 or 5 months, and I just rushed back. I had no flexibility in my elbow. I couldn't extend it, and I tried to come back and play because I was a franchise guy. I was like, I want to be out there for the team, and couldn't shoot the ball. Like, luckily I had a left hand. I still averaged a double that year, I believe. But then that's when the free throws went downhill. So like, I never really, I wasn't a phenomenal free throw shooter before that, but I never really had any mental problems with it. I just never even thought about it, right? Some games I go 5 for 5, some games I go 2 for 7. Didn't bother me. Then when I started getting hacked, hacker shack, that really started to mess with me mentally because I just knew my technique in my elbow. So I didn't know at the time that season after I did it, I had the surgery, and I was getting pain in my elbow. Like 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10 shots, I'd shoot the ball, and on the extension, it'd feel like someone just rammed a knife in my elbow joint. And I'm telling the trainer like something's wrong. I can feel like it happens every now and then, to the point where like the ball would just, I'd miss everything. Right? It'd be like, oh, what the hell's going on? Like, you're crazy, you're fine, you just got to play through it. And then end of the season, when I got a scan, I had a massive floating bone that was moving around in that little ass elbow joint, which explained it, right? But long story short, so then that mentally kind of messed with me a little bit, and then my shot just went out of the window, and just something I never really was aggressive with and was able to get back because of that injury. And then thankfully Scott Skiles really leaned on me to be a good defensive big when he was in Milwaukee, and then that became my elite skill set, was shot blocking, protecting the rim, setting good screens, and still being a guy that could get 10 or 15 on any given night with Milwaukee at that point, but getting 10, 15 rebounds, quarterback in the defense. So then when I got traded to Golden State, it was a perfect fit because I didn't need to carry that offensive load anymore. I could just concentrate on rebounding and doing the little things, and it was a perfect cog in the wheel that was, the juggernaut of the Golden State Warriors throughout that era.
Yeah, you already the best defender in college as well. So just kind of like that skill, whenever that you were given this new role and bigger role, it probably just elevated your defensive skill set to the next level. And through the injury, I suppose that's how your left hand also got developed to the next level, because you were throughout your career, your left hand got better towards the second half of your career. And whenever we faced you, that was very noticeable in terms of like how you finished with the left hand, and that helped you to be a little bit more universal on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I always had a left, probably from teenage years. It was just something my trainer reiterated on me, we did a lot of stuff with the left hand, even when I couldn't even make a layup. And then thankfully I had that. I was confident enough to go to that instead of my right, where it got so bad with my right hand that, like you said, teams were actually forcing me to go to my strong hand, my right hand, because they knew like, don't let him put it in his left. So, and then the thing you say about defense in college, I wasn't known as a great defender in college, and the reason was because I couldn't afford to get in foul trouble. So there were a lot of times where our coach would be like, look, I don't want you blocking shots because we need you on the floor. We can't have you foul out. Early on in the season, I had a couple of games where I get 2 or 3 fouls in the first half, and then it'd throw me off a little bit. So they were like, sometimes just let them lay it up. So then I got a stigma saying that I was a bad defender coming into the NBA, and that I was a real poor defender, a plotter. And that's the other thing that I was proud of, was that, making an all defensive team and led the league in block shots one year. So yeah, I mean, like that was world-class scouts saying that kind of stuff. And, I managed to, don't get me wrong, I wasn't a fantastic defender. I didn't know the NBA game that well, but then Scott Skiles really taught me how to be, the quarterback of a defense as a big guy is what you should be. You're the eyes and ears of everybody. You can clean up messes, spot fires, you can overhelp sometimes if you need to, and just reading the game that way. And thankfully I had that, because when my offensive game kind of declined a little bit, I was still elite at that level. If I didn't have that at the same time as my offensive game going downhill, I probably would have been out of the league much quicker than I was.
So that's what I was wrong about. I had this in my mind that you made all third team all defense, that was in the NBA, but Yep. In terms of still having instincts to defend and knowing the timing of blocking shots, when to reach, when not to reach, what to do in certain situations. Brad Stevens also talks about that you can teach a player how to defend. But I was wondering, what were like the one, like if you had to pick out one thing, that one key thing that Scott Skiles taught you on the defensive end, how to beat a quarterback, what was the number one thing that elevated your defensive ability?
I think he held everyone accountable. That was the first thing with Scott. You know, he gets a hard rap sometimes because he can be a little too disciplinarian in the NBA. But, you know, it's as simple as, I still remember a couple of games. I came to the help side rotation. You know, early on in a game, I'd come late to a help side rotation. He'd take you out with a minute in the game, sit you on the bench, and then put you back in 6-7 minutes later. But it'd be more like I'm going to disrespect you in front of the fans on purpose. Come sit down for a bit and then you go back in. And it was, so the biggest thing I learned from him and just in the NBA in general was with help side as a big, it's always better to come earlier. Get there early, and, you know, even as the pick and roll's going on from that wing and you think if he turns that corner, he's going to be coming downhill, just get outside that box early. And then obviously with the defensive 3 seconds, you have to cleanse yourself anyway out of the paint. So just go and get there early and then work your way back to your man. Now, there's some guys you can't do that with, lob threats. But then again, there are guys you can do that with who are lob threats if your back line is in sync with you. And that's why, like a guy like Andre Iguodala, and then myself, Andre, Draymond Green on the floor together, defensively, we could dictate where the offense was going to go because we were just so smart. You know, Andre knew when I was going to leave early to overhelp and vice versa. I knew when Draymond was going to lunge it for a steal and maybe miss it. It was just like in sync and it wasn't even spoken about. And so, yeah, the biggest thing I probably learned as a big was on that help side, make sure you get there earlier. And the other thing is if you get there late, you're going to be on a poster. So that's a bonus. You don't end up on a poster. And I haven't been on very many. A few people have got me, but for the most part, I'm fouling the shit out of you or I'm blocking your shot. So a few guys have got me. And that was mainly because I got there late.
Yeah, but so basically getting up high on the pick and roll early and stop the ball as to give the ball handler some pause before he makes a decision, and then getting back to your man in time.
No, not even the pick and roll. No, not even the pick and roll. So if I'm the help side defender,
okay.
I'm on the split line under the basket, and there's a pick and roll going on either wing. It's anticipating that if there's a breakdown or that guard splits or whatever, that if you're already halfway there early and I'm showing my numbers team outside the paint, and then I'm working back to my defender that's behind me that I'm helping off. That's what I mean.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of what you can afford to do in the NBA, and you kind of have to do because, you know, EuroLeague and that's different, and Europe because you can stay in the middle of the paint. There's no 3 seconds. Yeah. Whereas in the NBA, if I'm standing next to my man and waiting to anticipate when to go, a lot of times you're going to get there too late because they're too athletic. So it's more, I'm going to start hedging towards that side of the lane. And then while I'm there, I get my 2 feet out and I cleanse myself from the defensive 3 seconds. As soon as you get your 2 feet out, you get a new recount and then you're just kind of moving in and out. That's what I figured out. And that takes some time and just being with someone that knows, you know, a coach that knows the game, and then having teammates that, you know, I've been on horrible defensive teams before, where I would go and do that and they'd throw it over my head and get a lob dunk, and then I'm looking behind me like, where the hell's my crackback? Where's my and it's guys that just didn't care, right, on shitty teams. So on great teams, that hardly ever happens.
How much talking was involved?
Look, there's talking's involved. You have to talk, but I think talking's underrated. I think just talking can get you motivated sometimes as well. But with, like I said, with the Draymond and Iguodala, once you've played with each other long enough and your IQ's that high that we had defensively, we didn't have to talk, but we still did. So we didn't have to. I just knew, he's going there, I'm going here. It was just automatic. But we still did talk on top of that.
Same page, basically. I mean, it's like you said, like instinctual. And if you got guys on the same team that have high level instincts and have the experience to go with it, it's going to happen naturally, because once you understand the game, where the rotation is going, or it has to be, then it's you figure each other out. I guess, like the longer you play together, the easier it is.
Yeah, and that's probably the hardest thing in the NBA is because teams just don't stay together long enough. So, you know, we were together for 5-6 years there in Golden State, and it just goes to show that if you can keep a core group together of your top 7, top 8, make little tweaks along the way, it can sometimes, fix a lot of problems that you have, because you just, you don't have to have as much of a training camp, because you already know how to play with each other, so there's a lot of positives to keeping teams together for longer periods, which just doesn't happen very often in the NBA anymore.
That's before we go into some technical details about the coaching parts that I wanted to touch on. Talking about identity, but have you gotten the chance to reflect and think about what your life or your playing career would have been like as a player, if the social media era existed during your time? Because there's so much, and that's my pet peeve, with this topic, and everybody just like rolls their eyes when they hear me talk about it. So I apologize to everybody who's listening that they hear me talking about it over and over again. But I think about stuff like, what would I've been like, what if my career would have been like, or how would I have handled it? Because it feels like during our part, it was more a physical challenge. And now through this generation, it's more of a mental challenge of dealing with all this attention and dealing with all this media attention, that you're more absorbed what's going to happen on your social media account than you are on what's going to happen on the court. Have you gotten a chance to think about back and forth about what would have been?
Yeah, well, look, social media probably came in midway through my career. So 2008, 9, 10, somewhere around there is when it really started.
MySpace was around, I think, came out like 5, something like that. MySpace was the first trigger for me, but it was not as big.
And then Facebook was out around then. And then I think Twitter was probably the explosion when it really started. And that was, I still remember, I think it might have been 08, 09, because I believe it was Charlie Villanueva was on my team where he tweeted at halftime. That's the reason I know. And I only played with him a couple of seasons, so it had to have been in there somewhere. And he tweeted at halftime about, hey, we need a better second half. Put the tweet out. And the NBA didn't have there was no rules around it then, because social media was new, right? So that's the only reason I remember it was around that era. But look, being the number one pick and social media probably would have been harder for me. I didn't live up to being a number one pick. The first season, I was 9-7 my rookie year. Didn't play a lot, and then I started to get better and better. So maybe that would have affected me more. Whereas the same way, if I would have got drafted by a New York Knicks or a Los Angeles Lakers, the pressure would have been much more immense than in Milwaukee as a number one pick. So I was lucky in that sense. But look, social media, it has its pros and cons. It's I guess how you use it. I've spoken about numerous times. Steph Curry, after a bad half, would check his mentions and use that, and then come out and drop 40 the next half. And that's kind of worked for him, right? Where there's other guys that can send him the other way, and there's other guys that probably spend too much time, and there's guys that don't care about it all. It all depends how you use it. That's what I've figured out. There are a lot of perils to it, but there's also a lot of pros. I've met a lot of fantastic people through social media. I've networked business deals, I've networked with coaches and shared information. And so there is a lot of pros. You have to remember that. But look, it's just a different era, especially now. It's not really even Twitter. It's Instagram and it's about living that life. It's all about I'm a baller and I've got the nice car and the nice girl and the nice house. That's what it's more about these days than it is being an athlete. So with basketball, there's basketball and the athlete, but now it's that whole lifestyle. That's the cool part about it. It's not so much that you're a professional athlete playing one of the toughest, leagues in the world. You're the best. You're the top 400, 500 in your craft. It's nothing. No one cares about that anymore. It's everything else that you get along with it, and you see it in NBA 2K now. Like, I don't play video games, but I've heard that on the latest one, you can, do all that stuff and hang with your boys in the video game, so it's obviously a bbig part of what they're trying to sell. You can go to the barbershop, you can buy a car, all that kind of stuff. So that's just the world we're living in. It's all about flash and bang. And you want, what it does for a young mind is probably not good. At 18, 19, 20, I don't think a lot of people are ready for that. And that can be detrimental and go the other way. But you just got to kind of know yourself. If that affects you, I think you should probably turn it off.
That's one thing that you like, using it as an adolescent and using it as a grown-up is a difference. And it feels like, and it from your episodes also, that mentorship is a huge part of that. Mentorship while you're growing up, how to dealing with it now, but also back then as you were preparing, what was mostly what is ingrained in my mind from the episodes I heard was how important and valuable the mentorship was by Medi Clark and your agent David Bauman, because they're both. It seemed like they were not taking any crap from like whenever there was like shit hit the fan, whether it was at Utah or whether it was in at the AIS when there's like some challenges coming up. Matty Clark was like I enjoyed listening to him genuinely because he seems like the perfect mentor. The way he like expresses himself, the way he talks about certain situations in life that you have to step over, fight through, but also David Bauman, how he's preparing you for to be the number one pick, and throughout this whole process. Can you tell to me how important that mentorship was at the time and having the right people around you to keep you straight in line on that?
Yeah, Marty's integral part of a lot of Australia's best players. Myself, Delhi, Paddy Mills, Joe Ingles, the list goes on. He's had his fingerprints on all those guys, and he's coached professionally. He's coached the Boomers. He's coached college, but I think his best strength is just that day to day. He's just very even keel. He's the same every day, and he had that kind of intimidating factor when you're a young kid that you were scared to kind of go into his office and get chewed out by him. It was no nonsense. And I spoke about, there was some games he told me to leave the bench, go back to the locker room, go away. And but deep down, once you reflect, you realize that he likes that. He likes that in guys like myself, that fire and going back and forth. And the most important thing you come to realize with maturity, and once you become from a boy to a teenager to a man, is that mistakes are good. Mistakes are natural and they're going to happen. It's how you learn from those mistakes and it's correcting them. And that was the hardest thing when you're younger. You think like you made a mistake or you've done something stupid, that the world's going to end. That wasn't a big deal for Ramadi Clark. It was the next day after that mistake, which can go two ways for most people, right? And that's the same as basketball. You have a bad game, you miss a shot, it's always next play. So Marty was huge. Really enjoyed my time with him, and he's just such a really good person. And then you've got, who was the other name you mentioned? Sorry,
David Bauman.
Oh, David Bauman, yeah, agent, yes. Yeah, I was lucky. I'm not going to lie, like to sign with them. I didn't go through a deep recruiting process. They recruited me in 2003 at the World Junior Championships.
World champion, yep.
And yeah, I didn't know a whole lot about the game, was flying blind. We ended up just signing. The woo was that he was Michael Jordan's agency. So we're like, done. Box ticked. And yeah, I was lucky that I just chose someone that actually was a good person and guy and had morals and was a lawyer by trade, so I understood the business world. And he's just so much different to a lot of these agents you see today, trying to make guys influencers. He's not about any of that, and it just fit in perfectly. And I honestly believe, it was just a gift from above that it worked out that way, because if you choose the wrong agent, it can go horrendously wrong for you, not only with your career, but financially and family and all that. So that worked out perfectly. And look, David and I are still friends to this day. We speak a fair bit, and he's he's still doing some agent stuff over there in the US and doing pretty well. But he's a smaller guy. He's not a big lights agency, which I think suits him perfectly. But the unfortunate thing is there's a lot of guys that don't want that these days. They want the name in lights, and you try to tell young guys, like, go to the guy that's not the name in lights, because they're going to give you more time. They're going to answer your phone call. They're going to make sure that they have an incentive for you to do well. When you're just another name and number in these big agencies, yeah, you're with the cool agency, but he's taking the 10 players that are better than you's phone call before he takes yours. So that's just something that it's hard to explain to young guys. But those two guys were, a tremendous help throughout my career. And I think David, especially away from basketball, just his business savvy and mentorship. Times when I'm losing my shit about a coach or a GM or wanting to be traded, and he'd always have an even keel, balanced take on things and kind of talk you off the ledge in a good way and get on with it.
He was not a yes man, but he was very cerebral in his approach. It felt like, I don't know him personally, but it felt like he was, like you said, even keel, cerebral, and understood right from wrong with the judging the situation correctly. Thinking about that, but moving on more into the mentorship or scouting approach during the games. What do you expect from your assistant coaches before and during the game mostly? What's the number one thing that you like, the information that you want to have, whether it's post defense, how they defend you, so you're ready for where the traps are coming from? What's too much information, but what's the most like key information that you need as a big man?
Look, everyone's different. Everyone. I know a lot of guys that want a lot of clips before games. I know guys that don't watch any film. For me, the biggest thing I wanted before games was just the shot chart for guys I'm playing going to be guarding. So if I'm guarding, potentially a 4 sometimes and a 5. So the Clippers would be DeAndre Jordan back then and Blake Griffin, and the backup would have been Ryan Hollins, for instance. I want those 3 printouts of. You can get those shot charts in the NBA that cut the half court into 16 spots, and it basically says from this block, from 10 feet, from there's the kind of little heat mark things, and it says he's 10 for 31 from this block, but he's 20 from 30 on this block. From the elbows, he's this. I want to know kind of what portions of the floor to push that player towards. So that's what I used a lot, and that worked well for me. Same as if I'm going to be involved in a lot of pick and rolls, and I'd look at like a Dame Lillard, is he shooting more going left? Is he shooting the pull-up 3 more going left, or because you'd notice nuances where a Dame maybe shoots it more going left from 3, and when he's going downhill with his right, he's trying to get to the bucket or shoot a floater. So those little nuances don't lie in the stats. So that's what I wanted. There's some people that love getting clips, just quick hitters, 10 or 15 clips. I know coaches that positive reinforce, so some coaches that would give some positive clips of things you've done well after a game. So it just depends. But look, like you said, you don't want to overwhelm neither, and that's a problem that I see with a lot of assistant coaches, is they try to overdo things. So my advice would be talk to the player, sit down at the start of the season and say, hey, what do you like? What do you like from an assistant? Do you like this? Do you like that? Even your pre-game shooting routine, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to bring you some things, or do you have your set routine you want me to rebound for? Like whatever it is, right? Have that open discussion and then get a feel for each other, and you never know what you can learn. But I think a good mix of it. In game, some guys like feedback at halftime. Probably 2 or 3 things. You're doing these 2 or 3 things well. You're doing these 2 or 3 things bad. Or you need to pick these things up. But yeah, you just don't want to overwhelm where guys are overthinking things, because then if you're getting 5, 10, 15 different bits of feedback from your head coach, assistant, other players, like you're just like, oh shit, Ray Giacoletti at Utah, I can't remember the exact things I spoke about on my pod. I think it was free throws, charges taken, and I think it was the rebound count. They were our 3 things that we checked. There were our goals before the game were to win those categories: shoot more free throws, take more charges, and be winning the rebound count. And we check it at halftime. And he'd be like, we're playing shit because these are our numbers. We're, none of these, we're not hitting any of the targets. And funnily enough, with that team, when we hit those 3 targets, it means we're engaged because we're taking charges. It means we're boxing out, and it means we're being aggressive, getting to the rim, to the free throw line. And when we hit those 3, I could be lying, but we ever rarely lost a game if we ticked all those 3 boxes in a game. Outside of shooting percentages and how much points we scored, we maybe lost 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20. So keep things simple. And I think that's the biggest thing, and just have that open feedback dialogue with your player.
So it correlated. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's good to have that setting 3 goals early on and then always checking back on it. But there's also like the coach had probably a good sample of what works and what doesn't work leading up until that point. So I think every coach has to figure out in terms of like what league they're playing in and what players they face, what teams they face, what works for them. But there's generally like this foundational rebounding, taking charges. I think that's a huge one.
Well, individually, and then individually, you could with an assistant. It could be, you're not a good post defender, so keep a guy under 50% if he catches it on the block, scoring on you, or it might be, you're not boxing out, or you give up second chance opportunities, whatever it is, and figure that out, and then challenge your player. Like, hey, okay, DeAndre Jordan, he's notorious for following his own shot and getting tip-ins. So this game, whenever he takes a shot against you, he gets 1 shot. And then you evaluate that way. Like at halftime, hey, he's had 2 second chance opportunities when you win the game. Come on, you need to get a body on him as soon as he shoots it. Don't go and chase the rebound. So it's things like that, and then challenging the player based on those, because they're real direct, easy things to do that you don't have to go to a film for at halftime or whatever. And that's similar to the 3 things for a team goal, is to have it potentially for an individual as well.
But do you like to be challenged by an assistant coach as well, and certain like that, like pointing out that hey, like this, you need to pick it up because there's like he's going where he wants to go every time he catches it, or is that a head
Yeah,
coaching job?
especially. It depends. I mean, the head coach usually is probably going to address it in front of the group, but an assistant can pull you aside, not in front of everyone. I think sometimes put your arm around. It all depends. If you've got a coach that's a rah-rah in your face abusing you coach, then I don't think the assistant, I've had assistants then would be try to double down on that, and the player would already be tuning them out because he's already been cussed out by the head coach, right? But if the head coach is, you got the balance. If he's the cuss out guy as an assistant, you probably need to play good cop, bad cop. You know, get him as he's walking out towards the court, arm around him. Hey man, like coach, coach is a little angry, but you need to pick this up, pat him on the butt, and that's it. And then on the flip side, there's coaches that are quiet and too cool for school. Then the assistant might need to be like, come on, man, like, what are you doing? So you just got to read the room, no personalities. The biggest thing with coaching, in my opinion, these days, assistant, head coach, even the video coach, it's managing personalities more than anything. I mean, at least in the NBA, there's not much in the way of X's and O's and, this new offense that's just taken the world by storm, or this new defensive principle. Like everything's copied by everyone pretty much. Same as probably in EuroLeague and Europe and internationally. Everything's who can do it harder, faster, better, and make their shots and get stops. That's what it comes down to. But coaches that last can manage personalities. And you might have a player that is on your team that if you cast him out, he's going to shut down into a shell. That there's another guy, Draymond Green, that if you get into it with him, he's going to go back at you, but that's a good thing because he's fired up. So you got to know your personalities. So you almost need a psychology degree to be a coach these days. I think that's just as valuable as the X's and O's, because the X's and O's are just becoming, to me, they're becoming the same team to team, especially space the floor, shooting more threes. It's all kind of becoming the same. But yeah, it's that knowing personalities, I think, is the one thing you just have to have as a coach. If you don't have that these days, like you're not gonna last long enough.
100% agree, and I think it's more about knowing people and then implementing that onto the players, because it's very instinctual. You have to have a certain experience, but you also have to have being honest to yourself when you're talking to players, and then in turn being honest to the player as well. And authenticity is my MO, like in everything I do. Like I'm going to be the same way here on air and off air. Like there's no kind of difference in what I do and how I am. And I think in terms of coaches, they have to embrace that authenticity now more than they used to, because it used to be like putting on, like you talked about how Rick Majerus was on the court, and then as soon as he stepped off, it was off the court. It was a completely different person. Like there was just a different shift in personality. And it's in that era, as we talked, it's a different era. But I think that this human side is becoming, and it has become, a much more important factor in dealing with humans, dealing with people, understanding, having this empathy, and talking honestly about certain things, not only about X's and O's, but also building relationships off the floor.
Yeah, you can't have the two personalities anymore. I don't think you can. I think players see right through that. If you're, a guy that's not a rah-rah, in-your-face, going crazy guy, and you try to pull that one game out of 80, guys are going to be like, that's not you. and on the flip side, if you're, the rah-rah guy, and then you're trying to be calm, and players can see that the personality that you develop over months and months and months, that's you. Like, so if you try to change it, alarm bells are ringing for guys. And that's not to say that sometimes it's warranted for a coach to go crazy every now and then and spend one of those bullets, but yeah, you have to be the same on the court, off the court, even keel, be that same personality. And I think players have much more respect, and they know where you stand. So with Majerus, the thing was like, he just went so overboard with all the abuse on the court that, you couldn't even, it would just rock your brain when you try to have a normal conversation with you off the court. Dudes are just like, did you hear what you were saying to me for the last 3 hours at practice? Like, now you're asking me about my mom and my dog and my sister and whatever. And that's what was weird about it, where guys just were shut down and didn't even want to hear it at that point. They, so much so that guys would try to stay away from him off the court, you know what I mean? Because they didn't want to have those awkward conversations. So you got to kind of keep it pretty even keel for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about coaching before. I know we're in the soft cap right now with time, but in terms of system and coaching system, like I'm not wearing this for nothing. I mean, we faced each other a lot of times, and you were here for the Euro Tour 2015 when we played some friendly. I think one or two we played here in Lithuania.
Yeah, two. Yeah.
Yep, and then we played 2016 in Rio, and it was probably the worst experience up until this summer. So this summer, it's basically this summer pain overriding 2016 summer pain, and both were Olympic pains. But you guys knocked us out in 2016, and I'm sure there's gonna be some Lithuanians listening to it. What do you remember from that summer? Not necessarily from our game, but I was fortunate enough to scout Coach Lemanis' system as you guys were going up before you joined them as well. Like it was 2014 we played, I believe, in the World Cup, if I'm not mistaken, in the first group, and then it was building up, and I could see because I was doing the reports, the scouting, watching the video like till I was like passing out basically. But it was for me 2016 was the peak of the system because you guys learned how to play as the summers went on, and it just became natural reads where it was just so fun to watch. I mean, it was so fun to watch, and I'm not just blowing smoke up everybody's ass in Australia. I'm genuinely, I was impressed because it was fun to see the progression from year one basically to how it progressed, and I felt like you guys deserved the medal in 2016. Not to take anything away from Spain, but the game itself was a special game, but in terms of what you guys build was very unique.
Yeah, I mean that team was, obviously getting a bronze a couple of months ago as well was pretty much that core group. But Andre Lemanis was a big part of that. Often forgotten, and we were, in 2016. Look, we had a fantastic tournament and international basketball, Olympic basketball. We shat the bed against Serbia in that semi-final game. I think we had 14 or 16 points at halftime. We couldn't throw the ball, in an ocean. And they did a fantastic job of adjusting because we beat them up in the pool rounds, and credit to them. And then the Spain game, we get absolutely hosed on two calls. They call a foul on Aaron Baines with 40 seconds left. They call him for an armbar foul at the 3-point line guarding Pau Gasol. 2 free throws in the bonus. Then they come down and they call a foul on Patty Mills where Ricky Rubio, I think it was, Euro steps Patty, misses the layup. They go back on replay. There's no contact. He just falls over. 2 free throws. We were up 3 at that point with 40 seconds left. We lost by 1. We didn't score again for the rest of the game, which is obviously our fault, but we had control of that game because if they don't call that on Pau and they miss that shot, they have to foul. And that's basically put us at the line most likely, and then it's a 5. We get up to a 2-possession game, the game should be over. So there was that one, and then a similar thing happened in 2019 in the World Cup. They call me for Marc Gasol routes me under the basket. I push back for a box out. The ball bounces the opposite direction from both of us. The referee behind us points the foul out. Had nothing to do with the play. They give him 2 free throws. He knocks those down and ices the game. But before that, Paddy has a chance to win the game from the free throw line. He misses a free throw. Delhi comes down before overtime, has a shot to win it. He misses that. So all those bounces, and Andre Lemanis is arguably one of the best national team coaches of all time, but now he's in that echelon of the other guys that have finished 4th. And it was just a beautiful way to play basketball, in my opinion. He was a real well-balanced coach. We moved the ball. And yeah, that was automatic. That was probably the most automatic national team that I've been a part of, where we just kind of knew and were happy to buy into our roles. Didn't have to be overcoached. His rotations were pretty good, and we just couldn't get it done with the medal. But we still were top 4 in the world, which I guess isn't looked at as a positive, because 4th's the worst place you can finish in international basketball because you go home with nothing. But we still built the national team to what it is today, I believe.
Yeah, it was natural flow. It was, like I said, it felt like a natural. That's how the game was supposed to be played. The way the ball was moving, the reads that Patty was doing, that everybody was playing together, and it seemed natural clicking on all ends. And don't get me started on the referees because 2019 was a referee year for us, of when our coach went berserk also against France.
That's right, he did too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember that?
So
the Lithuanian crowd was going at the referees too. I remember that. Yeah.
It was a tough one. It was a tough one to deal with. Again, another summer that ended with frustration for us. But that's professional. I mean, national team is not considered professional sports, but it is is in terms of passion and commitment. It's professional. So,
Yeah, no
but
doubt, for sure.
I don't want to take up much of your time. I have one more question on retirement, and I'm gonna have like a final eight, because the final eight,
Okay.
because in your youth competitions, a sixth place was not enough for Victoria's for Victoria to put you in the top eight of the nationals. So I put a top eight for you together to
Okay.
finish off.
Cool.
So retirement. I ask players or ex-players in terms of identity shift, where there's like a change in terms when you were playing and not playing. But to me, with you, it feels like, and I had to write it down that I wanted to ask you that, but I'm feeling like you knew who you were and you know who you are on and off the court. There was no kind of like wishy-washy fear of who am I going to be afterwards. But when you were approaching retirement, and we go back to mentorship, were there some people, or was there something you were considering, like, because I'm sure you were physically drained, mentally drained, that's how it is towards the end of a career, that goes into decision making. But I was wondering, and I think that's the key question, was there some research, some mentorship advice that you seeked in order to how to approach it, or was it some just natural instincts?
No, look, I mean, I heard a lot of stories about how much every athlete's going to struggle. There's not one that's not going to struggle. That's why a lot of guys try to do something straight away, and it's usually the wrong thing. They just try to go and do another job, and then they end up like, I didn't want to jump into something just because. Like, for instance, I got offered to be the assistant coach on the national team, the Boomers, right? And I only just retired 3 or 4 months ago, and I was like, I don't want to jump into that just because. I want to do it when I want to do it. But to be honest with you, I retired at probably outside of basketball, I retired at the worst possible time with what's going on in the world. So most of the things that I wanted to do, one was setting up a proper podcast studio and really ramping this thing up. I couldn't do because I don't know if you follow Australia much, but it's a shit show over here still. We're one of the last countries left that's locking down like crazy, and all these restrictions. We can't even travel to different cities in our own damn country. The borders are locked. So it's thrown a lot of problems my way. Well, not just my way. Everyone's struggling, but where I couldn't phase into what I wanted to do. So that was a bit of an adjustment. But no athlete's ready for it. We're so on to the next thing: road trip, Olympics, NBA finals, blah blah blah, off-season workouts, physio. Everything's always, and that switch gets turned off. It's like, okay, what am I doing now? Like, you can only drink beers on the beach for a couple of weeks till you're like, I need to do something, right? So that was probably the biggest struggle. And then just moving back home full time with my wife and kids, and not ever being home for more than a few hours at a time, to now being home 24 hours. Obviously probably was tough for my wife at the start. Was probably just, so used to having that competitive edge, probably being nitpicky with things with my kids or my wife, and then actually realizing it and being like, hang on a second, this is more me than them. So it's a hard adjustment, and there's not one athlete in the world that doesn't go through it. It's a matter of how you handle it. I know a lot of people have really handled it poorly, and you can understand how. If you don't have the right transition set up, the right family structure, it can be a real struggle. And you try to implore athletes to have a passion outside of basketball. For me, that's probably poker, most likely. I love playing poker, which once again the pandemic hasn't helped, because live games are in the toilet pretty much, because you can't play because of the virus. So playing a lot online, and then the podcast. I just love storytelling. I love talking to, much like yourself, I love talking to people, not just basketball. I love talking everything, meeting different people, different walks of life. Whether they work in politics or sports or acting, or even just everyday business people that have built empires. I love just hearing those stories about how they've gone about it and sharing those stories. So that's kind of where I transitioned. But yeah, I mean, there was some struggle days for sure, like all the money in the world and not having to worry about anything. You still have your struggles that you still need to figure out along the way.
I think finding purpose is that next thing, like you said, like figuring out like because you had purpose as a player, you had purpose on the court, you knew who you were, what you had to do day in, day out, this regimen, like the structure that goes in of being a pro athlete. And you said like it was some push, like with what you said with your wife, there were some things that you had to adjust right after you retired. Yeah. And one story popped into my mind before we go into the final eight, was this toothpaste story I have with my girlfriend that I kick myself, and she's probably not going to listen to it anyway. But she's in the right. Like she's completely right of what she told me, because I like to have the toothpaste upside like down with the lid down so that it just comes out easier. And she has brushing her teeth, and she put it upwards. And I could point it out, I could not point it out, but hey, it's supposed to be this way, and she was like, she snuffed at me, was like, oh gosh, like I can't help it, I can't look the other way. That's how to me, I was doing things a certain way, and that's how I felt like it's supposed to be this way and not that way. But at some point in life, you just have to let go, in terms of like, this detail does not make a difference. It does not change.
Yeah,
It does not move the needle.
for you to squeeze out the paste. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I mean, that's kind of the transition I had. It was just like, as an athlete, you have, like I said, you have training. It's about me. I come home, pre-game meal, my meal that I want to have pre-game. Then it's my coffee. Then it's my nap. And then it's driving in the car, leaving at this time. So everything revolved around me. So then, you retire and you're still kind of in that mentality a little bit. You have to kind of, you definitely have to adjust, but that's the pro and con of being an athlete. You have to have that attitude. Otherwise you're not going to succeed. You have to put yourself before family, friends, wives, even kids at times, to make sure that you're bettering yourself, getting your recovery in, all that treatment, the food, routine. But then, once you're done playing, you got to kind of adjust to the real world, I guess.
It's a mental adjustment, mostly. Just like it's coming from military basically into a real life, and that's how you have to look at it. So I'll go through the final 8, and you keep the answers as short as you want, or as whatever you want to elaborate on. I'm not going to dig in. I just want you to come in and shot fire. Do you feel like you maximize your career?
Yes and no. I think just around the injury stuff, it really, I think I could have been a much better player without that, but I don't want to use it as an excuse, but I think I could have got more out of myself. But I think any athlete in the world would say that, in my opinion. That I could have done, like for me, I could have done one more year and try to get to that 2021 bronze medal with the team. That would have been great, but you always think you can do more. So, but I will say I'm the most proud of being told twice that I probably wouldn't play basketball again, and continuing on with my career for another 4 or 5 years beyond that.
Biggest regret you feel you'd like to have back?
Biggest regret was probably going for that dunk with Amare Stoudemire behind me. I probably should have just kicked the fucking ball in the stands and just got the turnover and went back on defense. If I had it all over again, that's exactly what I would have done.
One thing you reverse your opinion while you were playing, that you thought that was one way, and then while you were playing, you felt like, okay, I reversed it. That's a different way. One belief that you had that you changed your mind on, basically.
One belief that I changed my mind on. Oh man. I mean, just how, I guess, athletic guys were. I wouldn't say I changed my opinion on it, but once you're on the court, seeing it on video and film's one thing, but then in real time, guys like LeBron and that, the way they move athletically really even notched it up. So I wouldn't say it changed my opinion, but it even was like, holy shit, like these guys are crazy athletes, and just being on the court with them was special.
Biggest advice to a younger self?
Biggest advice to a younger self would be enjoy it more. I definitely didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. And that's the curse of the athlete. It's always the next thing, need my sleep, need my meal, need this, need that. Probably should have at times just had a few blowouts and just really taken it in and enjoyed it and smiled a bit more. But it's hard because you're so competitive, and if you let that guard down, that next night someone's going to kick your ass, so you have to always kind of prepare. But I wish I would have just enjoyed it a little bit more.
One thing you absolutely had to do before the game, and the second one thing you absolutely had to do after the game to decompress.
Before the game would be obviously eating and that, but would be the espresso on the way to the game. Coffee, had to have some sort of coffee on. That was hard in some cities. You go to Oklahoma. Yeah, you go to Oklahoma City and you're trying to find coffee and you're like, oh, yeah, it's not looking too good. But yeah, traditional Euro style espresso or small little macchiato. And then after the game, for me, it was a shitload of ice. So just making sure, ice the knees. I had a bad ankle, so ice my ankle. And then, I mean, the thing is, it just took, after that, to decompress properly, like you'd never fall asleep before 2 or 3 in the morning after a game because you're just so hyped up and the noise and the crowd and all that. So just trying to get back to your zen was the hardest thing.
When did you know you were not working hard enough?
When did I know I was not working hard enough? I mean, look, there were phases. The problem was with probably the middle of my career, there were times where I thought I needed to do more, but I knew mentally I needed to do more, but my body was starting to break down, and I was like, ugh, if I do more, it could be detrimental to my actual body. So there was always that push-pull war with me towards the end of my career, the last 5 or 6 years of, I know I need to do more, but I also know that I need to try to get as much longevity out of my body. So it was kind of a mix, but it always played on me mentally. So probably mid to late career, I think I probably could have done a little bit more, but it was a tough situation I was in.
And the last one, the first thing, your favorite one story that comes to mind when you hear Rick Majerus. I mean, everybody has their Rick Majerus story, but one story maybe unheard of, maybe something that I mean, every story is probably funny that you can relate to, but except the ones that when you're cursing at everybody, but something that pops to mind right away.
Oh, there's so many, and anyone that's played for Rick Majerus or coached under him or even a team manager, whenever we catch up, it ends up going towards Rick Majerus stories, like every single time with the accent and everything. The two that come to mind, both were on court. He was big on making the right play offensively when teams played a zone. He hated when teams played zone, so it was a pet peeve of his that use ball fakes, be fundamentally sound, make proper passes, and then I guess one of our walk-ons, turned it over, whatever, and so he's cussing someone out, and he's like, "Give me the ball." And he's 400 odd pounds, gets the ball, and he's playing point guard, and he like throws a behind the back pass, and I just remember it bounces like 3 times, and one of the walk-ons steals it, and he just loses his shit. He's like, "Oh no, you want to play defense on my pass?" Like this, just like. But that was hilarious to us because he was like 400 pounds. Like he's trying to act like he's a point guard. This is how you make a pass. Look at this, behind the back, and like we all knew, if you ever threw a behind the back pass, he would cuss you out to the stars and make you run all practice. That was one, and the other one was we were in. I think we were in Colorado, and it was at CSU, Colorado Springs, and he was. He was big on defensive stance and closeouts and all that kind of stuff. And he just got pissed at one session because technique was wrong on the closeout. So he goes to give an example of the closeout. And so he like basically runs, stutter steps, blows out his knee, does like a forward flip and just rolls in a ball. And like we had like 3 recruits from Compton, like African American guys, awesome, like just like. These dudes are laughing like hysterically, like basically to his face, and he's like rolling on the floor, like, give me some ice cream. They're just like dying, laughing at the dude, and they made it fun. And these are the same guys that they were in the same recruiting class. They were really close, and whenever we'd huddle up, one of them would stand behind Rick Majerus, and Majerus was always doom and gloom with talks, end of huddles, a bit of sense of humor, but like if you caught you fucking around not looking at him, he'd lose it. One of them would be behind him blowing on his hair, and he's balding, so like portions of his hair would be like standing up like this, and we're in the front of him. We're all trying not to laugh, and he's looking at us like, "What the fuck are you guys laughing at? What the fuck is, what's so funny? This is a serious game tomorrow, whatever." Every day, one of these 3 guys from California, from Compton, was like doing something to mess with him. But yeah, Rick Majerus just has. I mean, I've got a few. I mean, he came to Australia, almost got arrested because he tried to bring in food through customs. He had like 10 or 15 cans of peanuts in his bag, and they're like, "You can't bring food in." Didn't mark it on his form. My secretary packed the bag. I don't know. And they almost arrested him. Just never ending with Rick Majerus. But look, I mean, he was off the court. He wasn't a bad person. He had a good heart, but just on the court, a switch went in him where all the humanity just left his soul on a basketball court, and that was gone. But on the flip side, taught me a lot about basketball. Probably the greatest basketball mind I've been around. So, I guess he still has his paw prints on my career.
Yeah, Bogues, I appreciate it. If anybody wants to hear more Rick Majerus stories with your team manager at the time, I believe, there was a lot of good exchanges about a whole bunch of Rick Majerus stories. Yeah. And so listen to Bogues if you're also on LinkedIn. Also, as you said, right, with the Rogue Bogues podcast. It's all over the internet, all social media.
Yeah, everywhere, man. It's at Rogue Bogues. We do a bunch of different series. So there's a weekly basketball. There's a My Journey. I do some current event stuff. Actually just had, I can tell you because it's going to be live tomorrow. We just had Brian Gorgon on the pod for an in conversation for 2.5 hours of just telling stories, and it was awesome. So that's going to drop tomorrow. Wow. And yeah, there's a bunch of different stuff at Rogue Bogues. It's everywhere: Instagram at Rogue Bogues, Twitter, YouTube, and we're on all podcast platforms basically, including YouTube. No video like you yet. We're not that professional yet. So when I get my studio, I'll get a little video set up. But right now, syncing everything is hard enough here in Australia when you can't even leave your house half the time. But yeah, we'll get there one day.
Yeah, you'll see the Lithuanian subscribership going up, all the views from Lithuania, the percentages growing up. So I went over the hard cap, so I have to pay the tax. So the next round of beers and drinks are on me. That's going to be
well, you didn't mention the one thing you didn't mention was the 2003 World Junior Championships when you guys, Lithuania was the shit. They were army like, all the same haircuts, all nicely dressed in the green polos. They were mean mugging, basically laughing at us like, look at these kangaroos. Beat us up in the preliminary rounds. Linus Kleiser, I believe, was the guy then, really good player. And then we got you guys in the gold medal game and beat you guys by 40.
You had to bring that up, huh? You had to bring that back up.
You guys were good, man. You guys were like army-like, but yeah, these Australians with bleached hair and stupid haircuts. Your coaches were fuming, man. They were so fucking angry after that game, but it was good.
I remember you were talking about it on a podcast as well, and it was the semifinal that stuck out to me the most when you were saying like how the Greeks were putting
water.
Water on the floor.
Baby Shack, Shoutouts.
Sophomore.
As soon as Lithuania went on like a 5-0 run, one of the guys on the bench would get like a massive bottle of water, just throw it on the court. The refs would have to stop the game. Wipe it all. It happened like 3 times, man. And we're sitting there watching like, what the hell's going on here? And they still lost though, so that was a good thing. But yeah, that's Europe for you, man. Like there's some crazy shit that goes on, as I'm sure you got millions of stories too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, through my travels as I'm scouting, I had a lot of stories to that. I mean, like just one story when I was at Panathinaikos, when you were talking about Greece. I went to Panathinaikos game early on in my scouting trips for the Celtics, and I got a ticket. I had the seat, and I'm going on it's like 30 minutes before the game, and I'm coming on, and it's a huge line to go to my seat on the top of the bleachers. So I can't see the arena yet. I can't see the floor yet, but I'm in the arena, and I'm starting to walk, and I was like, I just got to stay in line, right? I'm gonna wait here. I'm gonna stay in line and wait till I get there. It was a playoff game, Panathinaikos Maccabi. And I'm waiting as a proper guy who grew up in Germany would do, follow the rules. And I'm waiting 10 minutes, nothing happens. And I'm realizing these guys are going to stand there on the staircase forever. So I'm just I'm finding my way through the fence to get to my row. And believe it or not, my seat was free. Nobody was standing on it. Nobody was sitting on it. I just got there, sat there. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be enjoyable. So, I mean, they have I think 16,000 capacity, but they find ways to open up the floodgates, and it's just it's mayhem. So it's fun. It's a fun environment. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's everybody who's a basketball fanatic should experience that. Whether it's Panathinaikos, Maccabi, Olympiacos, Žalgiris. I mean, there's so many fun fans to witness when you're EuroLeague games, and I'm glad it's coming back now because fortunately it's starting to hopefully it's going to continue to go that direction. And hopefully Australia will open up as to the max as well soon.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, Bogues, I appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for listening. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time now. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.